Hi submarine friends, welcome to my super messy shop. I've got so much mess in here, I really need to do a big cleanup job, but I want to get this done. So what we got here is the opening is created for the door, and I just took some 3/4 inch heater hose and wrapped it around as a temporary starting point for a gasket. I have some 1/8 EPDM rubber gasketing stuff here that's in 12-inch wide. I think it's maybe 16-inch wide sheet. So I can make a gasket, but it would have a little splice top and bottom, but that's no big deal. So the only thing left to do is mount this air cleaner. So the door right now bolts in 3 places because I don't want to commit to putting hinges on until I know the thickness of the gasket and what kind of layers I'm adding to the steel plate and whatnot. So this is just to seal it up and start measuring how noisy it is. So the air cleaner is very important because the suction is really, really loud. I don't want to put this on the door because it interferes with the operation of the door. So I'm thinking about possibly mounting it up here, just weld the pipe through. So this is an airtight chamber, so it'll suck the air through here, through the filter, which acts as an air muffler, suction muffler, I don't know what you would call it. So the other thing I did is I've got a muffler mounted right here, pipe coming through that's sealed. I actually even put caulking on it and I tacked it in place. It'll have a bolt together flange. But again, I don't want to put a bunch of work into something that may need to be changed. So I just put a few spot welds on there because I'm only going to run it for like 30 seconds at a time. I just have to listen to it and then shut it down. So flexible coupler is in. The fuel filter and water separator is in. And that's permanent. And so then this is where the fuel lines connect. So the fuel lines are inside the hull of the submarine and they just connect here and here. This one is the pressure. I have an electric fuel pump on it just to prime it up. And then this is the return. I'm just going to put a jerry can here and dip the hoses in. So the next thing I have to figure out is fuel lines and location of the fuel tank. I'd like to put the fuel tank up front underneath the forward ballast tank. But I have some concerns. I checked on ChatGPT about the distance that the fuel can travel from the tank to the engine, and it says 10 to 15 feet is fine. And you have to use a 3/8 or 1/2 inch fuel line. And one recommendation was to have the fuel tank a foot lower than the engine. But in my case, it's going to be probably 1.5 feet above the engine. Now ChatGPT says that's okay and even beneficial, but you have to have a hull stop, which I have anyways, and you need a fuel shut off at this end and the other end, and then you need to have a loop in it so that it can't create a siphon. So if there's a failure with the line inside here, it doesn't just siphon the whole tank of fuel inside. So I got to figure out how to do that. That can't be too complicated. Haven't given it a lot of thought yet. So while I work on stuff like this, I think of the next, something else that I have to do down the road. So fuel system is, if anybody has any ideas, I'm all ears. Apparently it's fine. ChatGPT says that distance is fine. You just have to upsize the fuel line. The other thing that I'd really like to avoid, just for simplicity. So this is the return line. So the fuel gets sucked in by the mechanical fuel pump, sent to the injector pump. The fuel that it doesn't use gets sent back to the fuel tank. Well, that's a long journey for the fuel. It would be really nice if I could go upstream of the suction side and just tee in the return so that it travels in a loop. I don't know if I could do that. I got a diesel mechanic friend at the coast. I think I'll send him a message and see what he says about that. Or maybe you guys have an idea. But lots to learn about that. I gotta make sure I get that right. And I also gotta use marine grade fuel line. I was actually going to use copper tubing from the front of the hull, inside the sub, all the way to here, and actually make a mechanical connection with a compression fitting here, so this won't be rubber hose. But I gotta make sure that's okay, because weird things happen with marine stuff. You know, mixing different kinds of metal, that can be an issue. Anyways, I got time to figure that out. Plus it's easy to get advice on that. So that's where we're at. Tomorrow, I expect to start this thing up and start testing to see how quiet it is. That's very exciting for me. I'm quite excited about that. And I'll get to do it before I have to go to work next week. So that's terrific. Anyways, that's where we're at. Ciao.